Gay!
It's Pride Month, officially, and one of my many great joys in life is reading queer books telling queer stories by queer authors. So I figured to honor this yearly occasion, I would make a list of 11 personal recommendations that fit this category, and this list will span just about every genre that I could think of. Not just romance and realistic fiction, because I feel like those tend to get thrown around a lot, especially in the queer book space. And I've arranged it roughly from the most lighthearted content at the beginning, and then the darker and more soul-crushing stuff toward the end, because, I like both. I'll talk a bit about each book and why I thought it was good, and maybe by the end you'll have something cool to add to your cart the next time you're at the bookstore or at the library. And yeah, let's jump in. First up is A Psalm for the Wilde by Becky Chambers. And this is just a wonderful little slice of hope for the future. It's short, it's under 150 pages, which makes it super digestible, and it features two non-binary, or possibly agender, main characters. There's the monk sibling Dex and the robot Mosscap, and they go on an adventure together, full of self-discovery and treacherous obstacles. This book is dense despite its length, and philosophical about humans versus artificial intelligence and identity, and yet it keeps a pretty lighthearted tone throughout. I think it was Jack Edwards who said that this book was like a kiss on the forehead in literary form, and I think that's pretty accurate. I would recommend this to all tea drinkers and comfort seekers who are maybe a little frazzled about the state of the world and could use a break. Up next on the list we have Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawlor. And it's too bad that this author hasn't published any other novels, because this is that rare kind of book that perfectly encapsulates all the wishy-washiness of gender fluidity and sexuality, especially in a world that doesn't always have the labels for those things. This is a coming-of-age magical realism story about a guy named Paul who can shapeshift at will to become more feminine or more masculine as he pleases, and his escapades through college and queer fringe culture in the early 90s. It's good commentary about exclusion and toxicity within the queer community, which is, it's supposed to be this welcoming space, but it emphasizes how even queer people get uncomfortable if you don't check all their personal boxes and are this weird, unquantifiable thing, which I'm sure many non-binary, trans, gender fluid, and the like can relate to. I only wish that the book had more of an ending, because it sort of just trails off, but I still think it's worth the read for the journey and for the lead character and his silly antics. And it gets bonus points for mentioning Prairie Lights in Iowa City, which is one of my all-time favorite local bookstores. Next is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharpe. This is definitely toward the more extreme end of the YA thriller spectrum, at least from my experience. The main character, Nora, she grew up with a con artist mother, and now must use all the tools in her tool belt from that experience to escape a hostage situation she finds herself in, alongside her girlfriend Iris and her ex/girlfriend best friend slash brother figure, Wes. This is a rapid fire story. It's equal parts character and plot driven. It does really well at both. And it highlights the strength of family, both by blood and by choice. Without You, a memoir of love, loss, and the musical Rent, is Anthony Rapp's memoir. And if you're a fan of Rent, I think you'll enjoy it. And even if you're not, you still might get something out of it. This is Anthony Rapp, who originated the role of Mark Cohen. This is his life story in a bottle, where he talks about scraping by in New York City as an actor in the 80s and 90s, trying to get roles, seeing what worked, and then finding success in musical theater, and dealing with turmoil in his personal life in the background behind all the glamour, I suppose. And Rapp is a gay man, so it also talks about the AIDS crisis sort of by necessity. Mostly, though, it's about his complicated relationship with his slowly dying mother and the strain and guilt that puts on both ends of the struggle there. I think this book hits more than some celebrity memoirs might, because, you know, Rapp is not exactly an A-lister by any means, but he did get to be involved heavily with the cultural phenomenon that was the Broadway debut of Rent in the 90s. And I think that he uses that experience to create something really beautiful and memorable. Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. It's a good day when I get to talk about Torrey Peters. This book came to me at a vital point in my own transition, which is to say, a few short months in, and it rattled me to my very core. I covered the broad strokes in my 2024 end of year ranking video, which you should totally check out, by the way. But basically, this is a story of 3 different kinds of womanhood and their unique complexities. It centers on Reese, a trans woman, Ames, her detransitioned ex, and Katrina, a cis woman caught in the middle of it all. The 3 characters start to form a sort of reluctant family dynamic when Ames and Katrina's sexual escapades yield a positive pregnancy test. Peters stands out for being a published author who is unafraid to show queerness at its most unhinged and imperfect. These characters are supposed to be real people, and so they're going to have realistic flaws. The whole thing really is just a masterpiece and a breath of fresh air from the idea that queer representation is either tragic and demonizing, or it has to be squeaky clean with no in between. This book, above all, just feels unfalteringly genuine. And speaking of Torrey Peters, Stag Dance. This is the new 4-novella collection from the author of Detransition Baby, and it shows her virtuosity like nothing else. There's a story about a post-apocalyptic world where there was a gender plague set off by an unstable trans woman. There's a story about problematic gay romance at a boarding school. There's one about Vegas parties and queer gatekeeping, and the titular story, Stag Dance, is about a crew of lumberjacks who organize a ball where some of the men opt to go as women. With these 4 stories, Peters goes genre hopping, and it works amazingly. It's crazy. It feels like there's nothing that she can't do. And I might even recommend this over Detransition Baby if you're more of a genre fiction fan, just because it is genre fiction. And here's one that definitely gets thrown around a lot, but I don't care. It deserves it. It's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. And you can tell this story was written by a poet, and a damn good one, you know? It's a story of love and strife through the eyes of a Vietnamese American immigrant, and the prose is it's just so vibrant. It jumps off the page. You feel every scenery detail. The whole thing is written in the form of letters to the main character's mother, who does not speak English very fluently, and he talks about financial barriers, language barriers, and finding love in the unlikeliest of places. Overall, it's just a great piece of intersectional fiction, and I'm really excited to jump in to the author's new book too, called The Emperor of Gladness, which I just got at Half Price Books. This is another one that I ranked pretty high on my 2024 list. It's The Spirit Bares Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White. As a trans autistic survival story, it makes great use of its Victorian era setting. Everything feels like a cage. Differing from the norm gets you thrown into an institute where you either become perfect or rot away, literally, beneath the floors. And that's where the main character, Silas Bell, that's where he starts. It's at an institute called Braxton, where he struggles to hide his queerness and neurodivergence alongside 5 or maybe 6 other students who are all girls. There's one particularly gruesome scene in here where the headmaster of the institute brings in this severely crippled, deformed woman who went through the institute years before, and he reveals that Braxton surgeons did this to her on purpose, supposedly to cure her of sickness, which is really realistic for the medical standards at the time. So there's super high stakes, paranormal activity, and just a whole lot of heart here. It really is the perfect YA horror package. You know I had to include it. It's The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It's a stone cold classic, the story of a man who stays young forever while his portrait in the attic grows older and more withered with each of his wicked deeds. And I knew that this book was going to be gay going in, just based on what I'd heard, but I was prepared for something a little more understated. But no, this is just 2 older men thirsting after a twink and being very catty about it. Maybe people just had shit gaydars back in the day, because they'd call this shit woke today, and that's exactly why you should read it. Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. I couldn't confirm that this author was queer, but she gives good vibes, so I'm including it. It's a lesbian story, and everything is so sensual in this book, to the point where the description of eating a cupcake feels as steamy as a sex scene. It's quite a talent that Dawson has for nailing this feeling of pure yearning from the main character, even though there are red flags all over the place. It's like a minefield for this fascinating stranger she meets. Essentially, the 2 characters meet at a farmer's market where Ash, the vendor who sells cupcakes, enamors Ro, who is just browsing and is an academic in her professional life. And slowly they get more and more entangled in each other's lives, even as Ro begins to suspect that something might be very off about Ash. It's very dark, and it has this explosive ending that made me like sick to my stomach. And it's definitely the most shocking lesbian piece of fiction that I've read. But we will end with the most devastating book on the list, and maybe the most devastating book in general. It is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. There's a passage in this book that goes like this. Much has been written of love turning to hatred, of the heart growing cold with the death of love. It is a remarkable process. It is far more terrible than anything I have ever read about, more terrible than anything I will ever be able to say. Now imagine a whole book full of quotes like that, because every page in Giovanni's Room seriously cuts to the core. The main character, David, gets in a fling with the attractive waiter, Giovanni, during a trip to Paris, and must square his internalized homophobia with the fact that he's head over heels for this man. The tragedy is that David is a victim of circumstance. This book was written in the 50s and takes place in the 50s when being gay was, to put it lightly, taboo, and in many places outright illegal. So I feel like I can say point blank that this book does not have a very happy ending. It's a painfully realistic view of gayness in the 50s, and that's what makes it so impactful. I mean, this was the norm for so long. Not happy public relationships, but fleeting private moments together, knowing that the end was near. Giovanni's Room is a journey and a half, and it put me through the ringer, but it only makes me want to read more of James Baldwin's work in the end. And that's all the books I have for today. Thank you for tuning in. Happy Pride Month, and especially for my American and British viewers, remember that there's strength in community, and that we'll make it through this no matter what any dingus in power tries to reduce us to, because that's how we roll. And my question of the day for you is, what is your favorite queer book or author? Leave a comment, leave a like, and I'll see you next time.